wrong screen, the right screen here. In week 9, we're wrapping up the biological basis of behavior. Part of this doesn't please me because we split sensation and perception into 2 parts. So we're going to finish up sensation because that's the part of how our eyes and our ears and touch and all of our senses work. And then perception is going to get put into cognition, which picks up with Unit 2. So this week we are going to finish Unit 1. And so I want to do some review. I have a few jokes today. All right, this is a joke. It doesn't exist. Sensory confusion syndrome, right? Shh, listen to that. It smells like blue. There is a thing called synesthesia where sometimes we intermix something we see with a smell or a sound, right? That there is a cross kind of your wires in your brain, but just kind of funny. And then the second one, doctor, I've got double vision. Perhaps you should go around with one eye shut, right? Is a joke, but kind of funny. All right, so what are we doing today? I want to make sure that this, at the simplest level, that you're associating all the theories to the senses. So the first activity we're going to do is see, can you associate the right theory with the right sense? We're going to do that first, and then we're going to go into each theory and practice some AP style questions with that theory. And finally, I'll preview week 9's work so that you make sure that you know what you got to do to finish Unit 1. So we're kind of reviewing what you did in week 8, make sure you got it down, and then we'll see what we do in week 9. So what you're going to turn in with this today, any notes you take, the College Board questions, or the practice multiple choice questions that you answer. And the first thing would be this little matching activity, right? So on the top, we have touch, hearing, smell, sight, and taste. And down here, we have the theories that we need for each of those senses. So pause the video and see, can you match the theory with the sense? And when then you're ready, restart it, and I'm going to go over what you're doing. All right, so for me, when I do this, I do the easy one. Gustation is taste. Olfaction is smell. All right, vestibular is balance, but it's in our inner ear. Kinesthesia, this is another way of this, is proprioception, which is kind of the understanding of where our body is in relation to itself. That is related with touch. Then we have place theory is place theory and frequency theory go with how we hear. Gate control theory is how we experience pain. And Young-Helmholtz and opponent process is how we see, especially how we see color. So if you got those, very good. And we're going to look at each one of those today. So with light, light is a wavelength, and if we were in a physics class, we'd have to know a whole lot more of this, but we can kind of boil it down into the basics here. What do you have to know? You have to know that the light outside is white light. If that goes through a prism, it is broken up into the rainbow. If you remember, my kids know the song Roy G. Biv, or the abbreviation to remember the colors. So what do we see? We see this visible spectrum it's in humans, right? And you need to know that a long wavelength, so the longer the wavelength, is a low frequency, right? It's repeating less frequently, low frequency, and that's associated with the more reddish colors. And the shorter wavelength is the bluish colors, right? So shorter wavelength and higher wavelength. It's very interesting on infrared. Infrared, remember when we were studying both the endocrine system and sleep, that infrared coming from the sun can help our cells in our body make melatonin, which is why it's important to get outside in the daytime. All right, so we have to think about wavelength, short and long, and we also need to think about amplitude. That's how tall the wave is, and a taller wave is going to be a bright color, and a shorter wave is going to be a dull color. So there's so many, if you can kind of stop, remember the strategy we had of asking questions, you can kind of think of some questions you might see based on wavelength. All right, on part of the eye, you did a lot with the eye last week, but I just want to make sure, one thing that is kind of confusing for people sometimes is that the light is going all the way back to the back of the eye, and that's where your rods and your cones are, on your retina, the back of the eye, are the rods and the cones. And what's kind of interesting, if this is out of your eye, you're going to see that the signal, right, you learned about neurons, so these each have a synapse, right? And so the rods or the cones are going to pass the signal to the bipolar cells, and the bipolar cells are going to pass the signal to the ganglion cells, and then this is going to come together on the optic nerve and pass through the very back of your eye. And if sometimes I've seen questions asking about the blind spot. The blind spot is that tiny little place on the back of your eye where there are no rods and cones because the signal is going back to your brain. All right, so we refer, and when it goes back to your brain, remember it's passing through the thalamus. I find this super interesting that all sensory information goes through your thalamus on its way to the different parts of the cortex to be interpreted. And the interpretation, remember, that's the perception part and where we're going to pick up with cognition. All right, so these two theories, right? The trichromatic, right? This is easy to remember, 3-color theory, right, is showing that we have the retina. There's 3 different kinds of receptors. There's receptors that respond to red, blue, and green, and that these work in opposition of each other. That's opponent process, right? That they're working in opposite. So if we turn one on too long, we actually see the other color. And if you would like to experience what he did, this Herring guy, he took images like this. So if you stare right here, just stare at that black dot for about 10 seconds. And I'm doing this, and then look over at the other dot and tell me what you saw. All right, so write down, what did you see? What happened when you stared at this black dot and then you looked over at the other black dot? It's kind of interesting, and we'll show you exactly the experiment Herring did to show that these cones work in opposition of each other, or they're opposites to each other. All right. This goes a little bit beyond where we have to go now because we haven't done the perception part, but I do think it's kind of good to see how all of this works together because, I don't know, it just feels like I'm stopping at the sensation and then I don't understand the rest of the process. So I'm going to go a little bit into perception here. We have this scene. We have retinal processing, right? So the receptors of the rods and the cones send the information to the bipolar, send it to the ganglion. That goes all the way back to where we have what are called feature detection. So we have different kinds of features, and they're all parallelly processed, meaning that they're done at the same time. So our features are looking at different parts, and we can even see that we have different areas of our brain that respond to different things. And then, so some are the edges, the lines, the angles, different neurons in your brain responding. And then it's working together all at the same time, all without you thinking about it, to put together the information. So we have parallel processing of color, motion, form, depth. All of it goes on to help us recognize an object. Pretty amazing process, really. All right, so let's practice. Let's take everything up to here, right? And sometimes it's hard to put together what we learned to answer the question. So pause the video, right? And see, can you answer these 3 practice questions? These are from your book, not exactly from the College Board, but same idea. And then when you're ready, just hit play again and we'll go through them. All right, so 39, after looking at a yellow, black, and green American flag for a minute, you shift your gaze to a white wall. Which of the following theories? I hope this is very clear because we just did this experiment with the opponent process theory, right? Frequency is hearing. The Young-Helmholtz is the trichromatic, and not that you see opposites. And the ganglion bipolar theory is the information. I don't even really think there is a theory on that, but that's just how the cells pass information on your retina. And explaining signal detection theory to his class, Dr. Newfield should say, all right, so signal detection is another way of talking about the just noticeable difference. So we didn't exactly have this, but I threw it in here because I wanted you to see that sometimes signal detection can also be known as the just noticeable difference. And if we look here, difference thresholds, that's true, but that's not signal detection, that's difference thresholds. Various factors determine whether a person will detect a faint stimulus. Yes, that's signal detection. A person's absolute threshold is stable. No, absolutely not. Remember to only see it 50% of the time, and other things influence. Detection of all stimuli runs through the thalamus. That is true, but has nothing to do with signal detection. So remember, we can't necessarily find the true statement here. We have to find the one that answers the question, which is what makes multiple choice questions difficult. All right, after reading a textbook, Gerald excitedly told his mother that the iris' primary function is to allow light. That's what the iris does. Focus light on the retina. That's the cornea and the lens work together to do that. The cones process color, and the rods enable night vision. So hopefully you got those three. If you have questions, let me know when you turn in your assignment. All right, now to hearing. Such a cool thing, the cochlea, the snail-like coiled up part, right? So we have sound waves coming in. They hit the eardrum, which is made of the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup. Maybe you're asked to know the order of those. I have seen some questions. And then we have this oval window, which is a very thin membrane, which is why you want to be careful with Q-tips, right? You're not jamming that thing down in here. So far, you're hurting yourself. This is enlarged to show the middle ear. Remember, the cochlea is filled with a fluid. And on the cochlea are basal membranes, which are these tiny little hairs that get moved based on the frequency of the wave. And then there's auditory nerves in here that are going to send this to your auditory cortex of your temporal lobe. All right, so these two theories we had here. Well, let's again go back to the fact that sound is a wave, right? Remember, we can have short wavelengths, right? The bluish color, right? Long wavelengths was a long, well, these are, now we're doing sound, right? So not bluish color, high pitch sounds, right? High frequency give you a high pitch sound. Long wavelengths, which color was red, but with sound is a low pitch sound. And then when it's a great amplitude, it's a loud sound. And when it's a small amplitude, it's a soft sound. All right, now the place theory is saying that where this hits along the basilar membrane is going to result in how we perceive pitch. And the frequency theory says that we have the rate at which this gets passed on from your basial membrane, the rate, right? So how it goes is going to be the action potential on the nerve is going to help us sense pitch, right? That's what our brain is interpreting. So it's pretty cool how these systems work together so that we can hear. All right, let's try again. So pause the video and see how you do with these three questions. And then restart your video when you're ready to go on. So because of repeated exposure to loud noise, they experience daily. Airport ground workers are more susceptible to damage of the cochleal. All right, if they would have had the hairs, that would have been even better because it is what we usually damage are the hairs of the basal membrane, but that's not a choice. So cochlea is the best answer here. Jude's hammer, anvil, and stirrup were activated. Which sensory process? That is sound waves, right? Processing information, sense of balance is in the ear, but not what the hammer and the anvil do. Transmitting light energy is sight, and smell is olfaction, right? Nina's research project is based on the theory that the rate of nerve impulses traveling up the auditory nerve matches the frequency of the tone and enables her to sense pitch. That is frequency, right? It's the rate, place is where it's on the cochlea. All right, we're almost done. Stick with me. Gate control. If you have little children, this is actually super interesting because that our spinal cord contains neurological gates that either block pain or allow it to be sensed. And we really know this, right? I'm sure you've done this. If you bump your elbow or you get a scrape on your knee, if you scrape your knee and you blow on it, it activates this. So the information from the blowing basically gets through to your brain before the information of the pain. And so we kind of block the sensation of pain. If you bump yourself and you start to rub the area, it's the same idea. All right, now last part is this guy, I'll just tell you the story first. This guy jumps off, forget his name. There was no, the image is courtesy here, but we don't have, I can't remember the guy's name who did this. He's wearing steel tip boots, right? construction worker in boots. He jumps down and he lands on a nail, right? And everybody and he's in excruciating pain. So much pain that they don't, he's in the ambulance, they don't take the shoe off, they don't do anything, they get him and they take an x-ray. And they actually find that the nail is not in his foot at all. And he's in excruciating pain because he thinks the nail's in his foot. All right, so pain is partially a biological response to something happening to your body, but it also has so much to do with your perception and what you think about it. All right, and even in terms of like how painful something is, it can be to how we perceive it at the end of the situation. So like when you say how much you remember pain, like something being painful, it's not so much how much it hurt at the beginning, but what happens at the end. So like if you have children eventually, one of the things you can do with your kids to help manage pain is not overreact to a situation. So like if your kid falls down and you make a big deal of it, their pain perception is going to be far worse than if you rub it a little bit, say, you're okay, you're tough, come on, let's go, right? So very interesting in that pain is not just a biological process. All right, last set of questions. So pause the video, try the last 4, and then I will share the answers. So we have Bart easily reach out, pet his dog. He's aware his body parts, position of movement. This is kinesthesia, or you could also call this proprioception, right? Where we are in response to others. Which of the following might result from the disruption of your vestibular sense? Vestibular is balance, so that's dizziness. Which of the following is the best example of sensory interaction? Okay, we didn't really have this, but let's see here. Sensory interaction. So I would say that must involve 2 or more senses, right? And when I look at A, warm and cold is just a sensation of touch. So even though this seems like it could be a really good answer, I throw this one out because it's not more than 1 sense. Some cones have ability to detect red and green. Okay, that's still 1 sense. You notice a slight flicker of light when a sound accompanies it. 2 senses. That's why I picked this. Pitch perception is explained by frequency and place. No, it's just sound. So sometimes we may not know exactly what the question wants us to do, but I left this here to show how you can use what you think might be to find the right answer. All right, which of the following is most likely to influence your memory of a physically painful event? And it is how you perceive it at the end, right? Your memory of it will be, you might have hurt really bad, but then you overcame it, and you're likely your memory will be not as painful as if you did something and then, at the very end, the pain was far worse, and that could have a lot to do with what people did or how they reacted to it. All right, so what are we doing in the rest of week 9? That's all we have to talk about today. So, come up here. I don't know why that doesn't want to participate. Here we go. So you have this video assignment. You're finishing taste, touch, and smell on a concept map. There's some extra questions optional. I have an assignment to focus on the article analysis question. This is on the College Board, so let me just bring this up here. You're going to see, first I want you to read about it just to see what's going on. And then you will see on the College Board, I have article analysis assignment 1. You're going to complete it and you're going to self-score and then upload here a few sentences on how you did. And then I will know to go check your scoring. All right, then you have a lot on the College Board this week. Whenever we finish units, that's where we're at. So there's a College Board progress check and a reflection on how you think you did. All right, know that when you finish, did I put this here? I will add an extra video here to make sure you see how you can use your results on the College Board, also to see should I watch any extra videos. So I will add a video to this assignment so that it's there. I thought I had it there, but I don't. So I should add it. And then the very last thing is the unit assessment. And I should add, I put a time limit on the progress check, but you can submit after the time. So if you need more time, take it, but really try to do not look up information when you take this. See what you know, and that'll help you know what you need to study. I have some more optional resources here from your textbook, and then take the unit assessment on the College Board. Obviously, this you have until Sunday, so what, 25th, 26th, October 26th to finish all of this for full points. So, or whatever Sunday is. So if I use this video in a second year, the Sunday of the end of the week. All right, that's it for this week. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for your attention.